begin. Welcome to our session on maintaining your child care facility investments. We want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to learn more on this topic that might be top of mind for many of you who recently probably made some grant-funded investments to your space and maybe looking for ways to ensure those improvements that you put a lot of time and energy and resources into last and stay in great condition for as long as possible. Our goals for holding the session today includes sharing some information on the long-term and sometimes unanticipated impacts of delaying maintenance of a space. We want to offer you some tools and resources for putting a maintenance plan and procedures into place, including some specific considerations for typical child care facility improvements that we see, and to explore a few funding considerations to support you and your maintenance projects. We do have a busy agenda today and some really amazing panelists. So as we mentioned, we will be sharing out this recording afterwards. So you will have links to resources, the recording and the slides available to you after if there's anything you want to revisit, because we do plan on going through a lot of information. That includes a little intro to LISC, as well as just an overview of what we mean when we talk about building maintenance. We'll go through some steps in the planning process to develop a maintenance plan. We'll have our partners at Studio MLA take us through some interior and exterior facility maintenance design considerations, and they'll be looking at that through the lens of assessing a site, designing or redesigning a site, and then maintaining your existing site. We have a partner with us from IFF who's going to be talking about some building envelope maintenance. We'll get a little bit into some leased facility considerations for those of you who might lease a space, funding strategies, and then again, we'll be leaving you with some tools and resources. Let's do some introductions. So my name is Megan Ressler, and I'm a senior program officer at LISC, where I support the National Child Care and Early Learning Initiative. I am so grateful for everyone who is here. You, our community partners, are essential to our work, as well as our presenters pictured here and colleagues who are working behind the scenes, who have all collaborated to bring this training together today. Our presenters include other members of the LISC team and some of our longstanding partners in this work, each of whom bring a diverse set of expertise and experience in supporting childcare and early learning programs and developing safe, high-quality learning environments. With that, I will ask each of our panelists to please introduce yourselves, and we will start off with Erin.
Hi, everybody. I am Erin Cox. I am a senior program officer with LISC, and I'm out of Rhode Island, and we operate the Rhode Island Child Care and Early Learning Facilities Fund. And I'll pass it to you, Cynthia.
Thanks, Erin. Good morning, everyone from Arizona. Good afternoon to those of you on the East Coast. I'm Cynthia Melby, Senior Program Officer, also with LISC, but located in the Phoenix office. And we just recently finished administering the Arizona Child Care Infrastructure Grant. So glad to be in the company of all of you. And thank you for joining us. I'll pass it over to David.
Thank you, Cynthia. Hey, everyone. My name is David Johnson. I'm halfway in between. I'm in Kansas City myself, but supporting all the different LISC program offices and programs in the small business funding space. So excited to talk with you about funding strategies today. Thanks. I'll pass it to Karen, I think.
Hi, I'm Karen Shirley with Studio MLA. I am going to be talking to you about the interior of some of the buildings, and I'll pass it to Joanne.
Hi, I'm Joanne Hiromura. I'm a landscape architect, also a certified playground safety inspector. Work with Karen at Studio MLA, and I head up our landscape and playscape design department. Rachel?
And hello, good morning and good afternoon. So my name is Rachel Sikora, and I am the Director of Consulting for Design and Construction at IFF. And just a quick little bit about IFF. We are a community development financial institution, also known as a CDFI. We're a nonprofit real estate consultant and developer. We also have a really deep background in early childhood education facilities, and that dates back to our founding in 1988. Along with community health, K-12 schools, and the arts. We're headquartered in Chicago. I'm sitting here in our Detroit office, so I'm on Eastern Daylight Time with some of our participants here, but we also serve communities across the Midwest. We have 9 offices in 6 states, and excited to be here and excited for this time together.
Thank you, everybody. We just want to give a quick overview of childcare and early learning here at LISC. LISC's early childhood facilities program has worked to expand and promote early childhood education by investing in age-appropriate settings and facilities to increase the supply of and access to high-quality early learning programs. We've served as an advocate, thought leader, and resource to the field for over 2 decades. Given the complexity of the work and the importance of local context, we know we're only successful when we partner and collaborate with our local offices, like those here with us today in Rhode Island and Arizona and elsewhere. The knowledge, skill sets, and partnerships they are equipped with strengthen our efforts and expand our reach relative to early learning facilities. I will turn it over to Cynthia to speak a little bit more about the LISC Phoenix Childcare Infrastructure Grant Program.
Thanks, Megan. As I just had mentioned earlier, we are new in the LISC office world to the childcare sector in the Phoenix market, but LISC has been located here for over 30 years in Arizona and learned a lot from our Rhode Island partners. So thanks. It's good to have Erin here in good company. We were able to, in partnership with 2 state agencies, Department of Economic Security and First Things First, invest over $60 million in a very short period of time, less than a year, into our childcare facilities, both homes and centers. And so you can see some of this data here on this slide. 511 facilities were able to be supported. We did quality improvement as well as expansion and encouraged some new facilities to open as well. And we wanted to make sure that we were servicing everybody across the state. So we were able to reach 13 of our 15 counties. We have very large counties here in Arizona. And we also made sure, as we are modeling today with our Spanish interpretation, that our monolingual Spanish childcare providers who are really important in our state could access our grant program and feel supported. And we were able to do that. You can see that majority of our funds did go into childcare centers. That's probably common with some of the other grant funds, but we were very mindful to include homes as well, as they are a big cornerstone and critical source of care in communities, especially our rural communities. We also have tribal childcare providers across our state that we worked closely with to encourage them to use our grant program. One of the reasons why I wanted to share a little bit is that the way we're approaching this maintenance conversation is really driven by how you all are using these facility funds and childcare infrastructure grant funds. And so here in Arizona, which from my understanding is similar across some of our other state partners that have been managing facility funds, to no surprise, our playgrounds, outdoor facilities are where a lot of our dollars are going. So excited to have Joanne here. Obviously, Arizona deals with a lot of heat, as are many of you now dealing with as well. And our playgrounds take in a lot of weather-related wear and tear, but also use wear and tear. So it's not surprising that those need to be replaced, but we want to really be mindful of how we can extend the life of our outdoor experiences. So excited to have our conversation today. When we moved to the inside, it was flooring. Again, another large place where it's wear and tear, right? So how do we make sure that our indoor flooring investments stays looking beautiful, but also serves its purpose and keeps us out of licensing violations for as long as possible? Paint, that's another area where we saw a lot, interior and exterior. And then our HVAC systems, which obviously we've had a lot of stories where Arizona gets close to 120 degrees in the summer. Without an air conditioning unit, you cannot operate safely. So we replaced those 20-year-old units, almost everyone. We encourage them to replace their HVAC unit for efficiency, but also the safety. And again, how do we extend that life of that HVAC unit so that it can continue to provide that safe environment as long as we can? So this is just a kind of a teaser just to say this is some of the areas that we'll be focusing in on, not limited to this, but this is where a lot of the facility fund investments were focused in the last few years with the ARPA dollars. And now I'll pass it over to Erin from Rhode Island.
Thanks, Cynthia. So for over 20 years, we've operated a dedicated and fully staffed facilities fund out of the state of Rhode Island, where the goal is to create that equitable access to high quality childcare. We typically do this through a variety of ways, but the first is through funding. So we've delivered over more than $37 million to 250 plus early learning providers statewide. We have about 1,000 licensed providers in the state, so we're regularly targeting and working with about a quarter of the providers that we have. So still a long way to go. We also do this through technical assistance, where on an annual basis, we're providing roughly 1,000 hours of long-term and dedicated one-on-one TA to groups to about 80 organizations a year. This includes about half of the organizations that reach out to us who need facility improvements that are related to deferred maintenance, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a bit. We've created an online training portal, but we've also developed written resources and tools like facilities checklists that both center and home-based providers can utilize to self-assess the condition and help prioritize improvements that are needed in space that often relate to maintenance-related issues. We've also influenced and guided some statewide policy, but we also directly work with and train our licensing agents as well as our partner agencies on facilities. So with that, we'll talk a little bit now about the impact of maintaining your space. So many building elements need to be maintained and cared for to function and to prevent costly repairs. Postponing maintenance is one common way organizations generally can try to save a little bit of money by waiting to do something. But this practice is called deferred maintenance, and it tends to lead to more frequent and higher repair costs over time, sooner than projected replacement costs, and equipment that might not actually deliver the quality of service that it should. Some of the benefits of regular maintenance are that it helps keep your high quality childcare safe space. You're safe and healthy and in good repair. It protects and extends the life of your investments and prevents the costly issues that might arise when you do delay maintenance. And it does allow you to save and budget well in advance for regular upkeep and anticipated equipment replacement costs. We can think of maintenance in three categories. The first is preventative maintenance, which is early and upfront inspections and activities that can help extend the useful life of something. There's programmed, routine, or scheduled maintenance, which are your day-to-day activities and your routine checks on equipment and items in your space. And then there's emergency maintenance, where it's when the building occupants or the safety of the building itself are immediately threatened or baseline standards aren't being met. So on the next slide, this chart to the left is actually a distribution of childcare program expenses, where the dark gray is classroom materials, the light gray is office and administration, and the blue is for your payroll. So that yellow bar is actually for your occupancy expense costs. So already there's very, very little room for maintenance, let alone thinking about improvements or expansion. But according to the EPA, every dollar that is spent early on preventative maintenance actually yields about $4 in savings, which avoids that cost of future repair or replacement of systems. We do hope to present some strategies and priorities to you throughout this conversation so that you can plan ahead and help you realize any long-term goals that you might have for maintaining or improving your space. We know that many of you that are attending this session have worked really hard to make investments in your space, either out of your own pocket or having been awarded a facility grant. And we know that facilities projects, big or small, take a lot of time and energy and resources, but regular maintenance, which is a theme you're going to hear a lot today, really can help upkeep your facilities to keep it operating as intended, to save money down the line, but it also really impacts your ability to comply with regulations. So speaking of regulations, most licensing regulations, which do vary by state, do require some level of general maintenance to ensure that a building is in good condition. And good condition, I'll use that term here, but depending on the licensing regulation, it's a bit of a vague term, but it could be a clean condition or a working condition or operating condition. But generally speaking, you need a building that is in that good repair. And that can be that the area is free of trash and debris, that windows and trim are in good condition, so no broken panes of glass, that the trim isn't cracked or falling off, that the roof appears to be in good condition, which means there are no apparent leaks or missing shingles, and that, there's the entrance and the parking area have adequate working lighting, that hallways and corridors are meeting OSHA standards, that ceiling tiles are intact and free from water stains, that flooring is in good repair. I know that Cynthia mentioned flooring was a really big change. That was a wear and tear situation in Phoenix. So no cracked or peeling tiles, no ripped carpeting. Walls and floors are free from splinters and free from peeling paint. And that heating units, your HVAC, your air conditioners, all of those are intact and working, and that your plumbing is intact and working. And in addition to building condition and good repair, referenced in regulations are generally, facility health and safety. So common things that references are, and I won't read all of these, but that there aren't any sharp objects or major tripping areas, or obvious child hazards that can impact a kid's ability to move freely through a space, that emergency exits and pathways are clearly identified, that spaces are uncluttered, that space is easily supervised, and that heating units are concealed and separate or securely covered, and that operable windows have secure screens. This can be a lot to manage between just making sure that the facility is in good condition and meets facility health and safety. But maintenance planning is really, really important. And so with that, we'll talk more about maintenance planning and how you can prevent or make sure that you're meeting some of these requirements. So I'll kick it back to you, Megan.
Maintenance planning. We are definitely all about planning. So just getting on the same page as others at your program, or like if you lease a space, your landlord, if you're sharing a space, you might have, other tenants you want to coordinate with. This type of plan can help create buy-in and clarify to everyone involved how to communicate when maintenance needs arise. And when they do, which they will, what action to take to make sure that they don't kind of snowball into greater issues. Maintenance planning can help you prepare for funding opportunities and help you budget for the future. But a plan's not useful, as we know, if it's not something you can realistically and reasonably implement. So we're going to talk about some priorities specific to childcare spaces as well. So we have a planning your maintenance program in 5 steps, just an overview here. We're going to keep it kind of high level. This is just one way to go about planning a maintenance program. We're also going to use this opportunity to plug a new maintenance guide that we are going to be sending to you after this presentation as well. That'll go through all of these steps in further detail, along with some resources and tools and templates that you can use. Our presenters at Studio MLA and IFF will also get into some of the nuts and bolts of, those specific elements that Cynthia and Erin have mentioned that you'll want to look at a little later in the presentation. So with that, let's just go to step 1, which is to develop a goal. Your maintenance program should have some concrete goals like maximizing energy efficiency, reducing your ongoing costs, preventing costly system or equipment breakdowns, ensuring compliance with those codes and regulations that Erin was referencing, because as you all know, there are a lot of standards and regulations that a childcare facility must adhere to. So all important things to consider. And because you have all of those stakeholders, we do encourage you to involve your community in creating these goals and making maintenance decisions that might look different for center-based versus home-based operations if you're in a leased or shared space. But just to give some examples, it could include your teachers, administrators, parents, community members. Think about, all of those who will be impacted by a maintenance program to help increase, buy-in. Everyone's working towards the same goals, and it can help inform decision making. Step 2 would be to inventory your facility's assets. So this can feel like a tedious, maybe overwhelming step, but it's well worth the upfront time if you don't already have something in place to create something where you're keeping track of your assets. There are templates out there to help guide you in the kinds of information that you'll want to keep track of. So think about what you would want to include in your maintenance program. What's critical to your operating your facility safely? Erin just mentioned a few items you'll want to ensure that are checked on a regular basis to make sure they are in good condition and operating as they're intended. You'll want to keep an updated list of those assets, what condition they're in, and their age. Some examples might include your HVAC system, fire protection, your electrical systems. So with that, are you, are breakers and fuses tripping frequently? Are wires fraying? Things like that you want to keep an eye out for. Many of you were able to use some recent grant funding to upgrade your HVAC system, purchase outdoor equipment, install new flooring or outdoor surfacing. Those are all assets that you might want to develop a plan for moving forward. The other thing to note here is that record keeping is really critical. You want to keep a file of any documentation, suggested maintenance information, the age and model of any equipment. That'll help you to think about when it might be time to replace certain items. Also, be aware if you're leasing a space, you'll want to document its condition, maybe take some photos, track maintenance or repairs that have been done in accordance with your lease terms. Your third step in this guide is to develop an inspection plan. The inspections are kind of the cornerstone of your maintenance plan. So think about what kind of inspections you're doing, how often, and what happens if there's a finding. And along the way, again, making sure you're documenting all of this. So like using a checklist is definitely what we would recommend here. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And this also kind of helps with that record keeping and making sure everyone's kind of on the same page about what your standard is for a well-maintained space. So we do have a snippet here from a LISC tool, but we will be sharing some other tools that are out there. This tool is available for center-based providers as well as home-based in English and in Spanish. So you can see here on this example that you're looking at your building exterior. So the checklist components are that, you're looking for it to be free of trash and debris. You're looking at the windows and trim. Are there any broken panes? Is it cracked? Are things falling off? The exterior of the building, looking for any cracks or peeling or chipped paint, things like that. So if you are selecting true for any of these, this particular checklist also kind of provides some guidance, as you can see in the icons that are on the bottom here. With these in the impact column, you'll see those are all health and safety related. The first item is a maintenance item, so you'll be able to pick up that trash and debris. And then the other items are minor renovation and repair that you want to take care of before they become anything major. Step 4, so important to establish a clear procedure to enact your plan. It might be a very simple plan or more complex for larger centers who have multiple sites, but it should answer some of the questions like the ones listed here, and it should be shared out with anyone that it's relevant to, any of your team members or other folks in your building, your landlord, your staff. You may need to offer some training if you have staff who will be helping you to implement the plan. So just make sure that everyone is clear on what their roles are and what to do should a maintenance issue be found. If you're currently in a lease space, again, just be sure to understand what your role is in maintaining the space, and make sure your landlord understands there are some additional maintenance needs for a childcare operation that might differ from some other tenants. So you want to make sure they're aware that you're needing to meet some of those health and safety requirements of licensing that do connect back to being in having your space in good condition and good repair. And lastly is budgeting. So use this plan to save and set aside funding in your annual budget for required upkeep and repairs. And this should include your playgrounds, any above standard cleaning services, any landscaping that you might have to do, also your regular cleaning, HVAC system servicing, all of those ongoing costs. And when you are trying to decide how much to put in that building maintenance and repair budget item, you can and should look to your previous year's expenses to help guide you on that. We also included a few kind of general rules of thumb if you need some additional guidance. So some guidance out there is that you should plan to set aside 1 to 3% of your building's value, 5 to 10,000 for centers, 1 to 2,000 for home-based facilities. Obviously, this will definitely vary depending on your space and the type of facility that you have. Plan to keep records of those costs so you can make sure that you're adjusting that budget item along the way and accurately reflecting any cost increases or changes to your facility. Ensuring you've budgeted for those preventative maintenance items will help to extend the life of your system, and ideally you're saving money on repairs over time. The other way you want to budget for maintenance is to create a replacement reserve. So as careful as you are about maintaining your facility and making repairs in a timely way, equipment and systems, as you know, will eventually wear out and need to be replaced. There are smaller items that you can more easily replace using your repair budget. But for some of those major expenses, the best practice is to plan for them by setting aside a small amount in each year's budget to fund a replacement reserve account. So we've included here a little example of how you might estimate an annual set aside. So you have your facility asset, for example, a boiler. You have an expected useful life. So how long will that piece of equipment typically last if you're doing all of your maintenance activities and inspections? 25 years we have here. You only need one. You have the unit price. So you're kind of taking that price and spreading it across those years of its useful life to set a goal for how much you might need to set aside each year in that replacement reserve. It's kind of like a savings account to cover what might otherwise be really budget breaking costs of some of those more expensive items. So have a plan, update those plans often, and just try to reduce any, unanticipated, any surprises that might come about. And speaking of planning, I'm now going to turn it over to Karen from Studio MLA, who will be walking us through some building maintenance design considerations for childcare spaces.
Thank you. So today I'm going to talk a little bit about the interior building maintenance and design considerations for childcare, and my counterpart Joanne is going to talk about the the exterior. Next, we're going to cover how to access a site, how to design for as few maintenance headaches as possible, and tips for kind of maintaining your facility. Next. Due diligence. Due diligence is spending a bit of money up front to bring in professionals like maybe environmental testing, architects, engineers, contractors, before you purchase a building or a site or sign a lease or to use a location. You want to having these professionals come in and help you evaluate the site, the location, could save you thousands of dollars in the design and construction and maintenance over the life of your center. So it's really kind of doing your homework before you sign. Next. So potential questions to ask for due diligence is, are there hazardous materials? Are there, for example, lead paint or lead around the pipes, asbestos, those types of things? Are there natural light to the building, windows into the building, or is there an option to add windows as needed? Are there more than 2 ways out of the building that will allow for safe egress? Is there enough outdoor space? And are there any high cost items that need to be repaired or replaced, like the HVAC, plumbing, roof leaks, things of that nature? Next.
Okay. So when you're assessing a new location, you want to look at the existing conditions of your site outside of the building. It's not even just for a potential site, but for your existing site as well. So you want to look if there are any exterior site drainage issues. Check existing gutters and downspouts, see where they drain to. Are they draining properly off your site, away from the building? You might want to check this out on a rainy day. See, where is the water going? Are there puddles? Are there, any obvious drainage problems? Having a properly draining site where the stormwater is draining away from your building is really important to ensure that your building isn't at risk for any damage to its foundation because of improper drainage. You could actually consult with a civil engineer who is a professional who understands drainage and how that could be fixed. Can be a costly endeavor, but you definitely need to make sure that your site drains properly. You should consider if your site is sloped. If there's a slope to your site, making sure that, again, that the water is draining away from your building. Thinking about your neighbors or the adjacent properties, like, are they sloping towards your building? And notice if their runoff onto your site is causing any kind of erosion or flooding problems. This could be a really costly maintenance problem to redirect somebody else's runoff. Also, considering the slope of your site would impact ADA accessibility, either into your center or for the playground outdoor spaces, making sure that your play space will be accessible, or if you will need ramps or any other ADA accessibility elements. Also, you need to take notice of other existing site elements that are on your property. Are there existing retaining walls, fencing, pavements, and really examining the condition that they're in. Do they need repair? What are they made out of? Or do you have retaining walls that are made out of wood? Down the road, they will need to be replaced. Wood does not last forever. So, considering the condition of everything else that's, on your site, and thinking about like what maintenance requirements they will have down in the future. And then in assessing a site location, thinking about looking and seeing if your site is in close proximity to any sort of hazards, like busy roads or drainage swales or ditches, that would require any additional screening or barriers or fencing, and also kind of thinking about adjacent property uses. So, thinking about, is your neighbor, will there be any noise or dust or dirt, or any other sort of impacts onto your site that might need maintenance considerations down the line. Okay, next.
So picking colors for your walls and flooring, and dreaming and imagining the perfect layout for classrooms and corridors and staff spaces and entry. There's so much fun you can have in making your dream into a reality, or taking your reality and making it into a dream, kind of depending upon how you look at it. But things like, while designing a vestibule or a mudroom might seem like a waste of space in a tight center. However, having that vestibule helps with your HVAC efficiency over the life of the center. And if you put in like a durable walk-off mat in that vestibule or mudroom, it helps keep the snow, rain, dirt, sand from tracking into the rest of the center, which can extend the life and cleanliness of the floors in your center. Width of hallways, strollers, bye-bye buggies, kinder vans, food carts, meandering children, all of these things are going to be meeting in your corridors. And usually the adult pushing the stroller or buggy or cart is going to make way for the children in a tight corridor. And as soon as they do, that often results in wall damage. So when planning out your perfect center, make sure the corridors are wide enough for at least 2 strollers to pass each other. And it saves on wall damage in the long run. Next. When we design for durability, there's some things we need to think about to increase the timeline of materials and decrease our expenditures of maintenance. One thing to think about is countertops and cabinetry. This is a product called solid surfacing. Several different vendors. You may have heard of Corian. This one happens to be by Wilson Art. And if you were designing your own home kitchen, you might think of putting in granite countertops, or you might think of putting in quartz countertops. This is a man-made product instead of a natural product. This is a man-made product. It's got bits of rocks. It's put together in a composite, and it's very durable. Putting this down wherever you have sinks can last on average 10 to 15 years more than plastic laminate countertops. You probably don't need this where you don't have a sink, where you're not hitting it with bleach several times a day, but having it in those locations where you do have a sink, as long as it's sealed tightly at where the countertop and the backsplash meet each other, this will last you at least 15 years, if not more. Corner guards on drywall, wherever your 2 pieces of drywall meet at a corner and it kind of protrudes, this is one of the places in your centers where you get the most damage. As soon as you finish that paint job, somebody is going to hit that corner with a stroller or a buggy or a cart or moving furniture around. These things cost between $2 and $20 a piece, and putting those on the corners can save you probably a year of needing to do your repainting the center, because it really does protect the area that's kind of most vulnerable in your center. Another product that you can think about using is a product called FRP, which stands for fiber reinforced plastic, or ceramic tile is another option. Applying this fiber FRP at places like the toilet rooms or behind sinks in classrooms, if it's a wall-mounted sink. The example in the top picture on this slide this is the same color as the wall color, so you don't even see it behind that sink, but this protects it from the inevitable water splashes and paint and finger painting, touching the wall and things like that. So this is all around the area behind where the paper towels are and the soap dispenser and all of that at the sink locations, and it really helps protect your walls. You can use ceramic tile, but ceramic tile, this comes in sheets of like 8 feet by 4 feet. And you can cut it to the size you need, but ceramic tile, as you know, has grout lines, and that makes it harder to keep and maintain over and clean over the life of your center. And also eventually ceramic tile, it will get cracked and damaged. So we highly recommend the fiber reinforced plastic to save some of your walls, especially at wet locations. Next, appliances. One of the places where you may want to spend a little bit more money is your refrigerators. The average residential refrigerator might last 5 to 8 years, but in a childcare setting, they're open and closed and open and closed every time you prep a bottle, every time you prep a sippy cup. And it gets a lot more use than really what a residential refrigerator is designed for. And each time it's opened and closed, it loses a little bit of that temperature, and it has to work its way up to getting to that temperature again. Whereas a commercial refrigerator is designed for that kind of open and close, open and close, open and close throughout the day. And it has a, digital thermostat, and it works much harder and much more efficiently to keep your milk and all of those things at a certain temperature inside the refrigerator. So if you're thinking about the life cycle of your facility, a commercial grade refrigerator is probably going to give you 10 to 15 years. And whereas the residential will only get you maybe 5 to 8. So even though it's an initial expense up front, it's probably going to save you more money over the long run. Other appliances, it's not as important, I don't think. If your local jurisdiction allows you to have a residential dishwasher, you can get now the ones with the booster that brings it up to sanitize to 180 degrees. Those seem to work just as well. And also residential washer and dryer are just fine. So that's where you can save, but where your initial cost, but saving over the long run, we highly recommend a commercial refrigerator. Heating, air conditioning, venting, talk to your engineer, make sure the systems are going to be easy to maintain, energy efficient, and durable. Flooring, you've already talked about a little bit with Erin and Megan, how important the flooring is. In wet areas, we recommend something called sheet vinyl. It comes in very large, like 6-foot rolls. They can pretty much do a bathroom with only 1 or 2 seams that are heat welded together. So it allows you to have this smooth surface that doesn't have any nooks and crannies, doesn't hold any dirt or any other unmentionable liquids that might fall on a childcare bathroom. The sheet vinyl is a win upfront for the cost and long-term in a center. Ceramic tile is also another durable option, but it does have it can crack and get chips over time, and it does have the grout lines that make it less easy to clean. If you're looking at your classrooms, sheet vinyl is for all those wet areas, toilets, kitchen, those areas. In a classroom or corridor, you might consider doing something like a luxury vinyl tile or plank. These have a very long shelf life as well, or shelf life, very long durable life in your center as well. And easy to clean, easy to maintain, and well worth the cost. Carpet or not to carpet. We do not recommend using carpet in a childcare setting because of the challenges with allergies and asthma and the cleanability of it. But If you really feel like, oh, I need a softer area for circle time, using area rugs or even, you know, mats is in our opinion, is a better solution. And if you wish to have carpet in adult spaces, you want to consider something like a modular carpet tile that goes down with kind of an adhesive, and it can be pulled up, just an individual tile, and replaced. Because soon as you get it in there, within a week, somebody's gonna, you know, spill their coffee or formula or whatever in there. So we just don't feel like carpet is the most sanitary flooring option for long-term durability and health safety. But if you're going to go with it, try to do a modular tile instead of a rolled out carpet. Next.
Okay, so when you're planning and designing your play area, considerations in the initial layout of the space will help protect your investment. So you'll want to think about the activities that you want to have in your play area, and think about the activities that are the messiest. So sand or water, or sand and water. You should think about locating those areas furthest away from the doors of your building to minimize tracking in of the sand or the dirt or the mud, to protect your surfaces inside. And you also want to think about the surfacing around a sand play area or a water area, because the area around it will ultimately be full of sand, or it'll be wet all the time. So something like grass, putting, you know, your sand play sort of in a grass area or lawn, you know, the grass will just die. The sand, you know, gets all over, and packs down the sand, packs down the grass. So, you know, grass is not a good surface to put next to sand, or, you know, with water, it'll, you know, will turn to mud. You know, there's also some considerations. You know, if you put poured rubber next to a sand area, all the sand gets on the poured rubber, and basically, you know, it gets slippery and will need sweeping off all the time. So a surface that's more forgiving, and maybe more natural, like, you know, a bark mulch or wood fiber next to sand, where if the sand, you know, is spilled out on top of that, it doesn't really cause any additional major maintenance issues. Same thing about locating, you know, water play, you know, making sure that the area where you locate a water play area has good drainage, drains quickly, it doesn't damage the surface that your water play table or water play feature is on. Also thinking about locating water play in a sunny spot, so that the water will dry quickly. Maybe thinking about locating your water play so that the water runs off into like a planting bed would, you know, helps irrigate your plantings. Storage sheds, which of course everybody says never has enough of, but certainly keeping your equipment, your trikes, all your loose parts in a storage shed helps to protect them from weather and damage, and protects your investments. Shade, providing shade, especially in areas that get a lot of direct sun, will decrease UV ultraviolet ray degradation of materials. Okay, so, and also thinking about the design of your play space and what you're going to have in it, you really need to assess your maintenance capabilities realistically. So having gardening space is a wonderful activity, but you just need to consider, like, do you have the staff that's willing to maintain it, water the garden, weed the garden. Otherwise, it will just be a maintenance headache. Or sand as well. Sand is such a great material out in your play space, but it does need sweeping and maintenance. Sand and water together, great, but they also can require a lot more maintenance, and so you just need to consider that. The picture in the middle there is a center in Cambridge where they love sand and they love sand and water. This is their beach in the summertime, and they're willing to maintain it. And actually, they have someone every day, every morning, the sand is swept off the paths in their play area. But they were committed to it, and they put in place the maintenance that they needed in order to maintain cleanliness and safety, getting the sand off of the pathways. Okay. Choosing materials. So I think, like was mentioned, your playground is a really big investment for your center. So choosing the materials that work best for durability, maintenance, and play value really needs to be considered. In thinking about play equipment, play elements, you have some options. So steel and plastic play structures are very common. They probably have the best longest longevity and durability, and probably the least amount of maintenance. Very durable materials. And then again, they're probably the most expensive. But they will last, more than 20 years. We design playgrounds all over the country, and so many of these play structures kind of outlast the desire to keep them. Even things change and the equipment still is in pretty good condition. All plastic play structures. So they don't quite have as long longevity as the steel with the plastic components, but they are pretty low maintenance. The one thing that you need to think about is in using them in very hot climates or in direct sun, they will degrade and not quite as durable, as steel or metal. And, they also get very hot. Same with the steel and plastic. So, they do need some protection from the sun for the shade structure or in a shady area under trees. But they are, fairly low maintenance, not quite as costly as the steel and plastic, and last, probably 10 to 15 years. There's play equipment that's made of more of plastic composite material, either Trex, which is a product name for a plastic lumber, or there's a company that actually fabricates their play equipment out of recycled milk jugs, so more environmental friendly, and they really need very little maintenance, being plastic. But again, in the full sun and over time, they can warp, and they don't have that. They're not as long lasting as a steel and plastic climber. And they're probably not quite as expensive as the steel and plastic climbers. There's then, of course, natural wood which is really, really popular right now. So, wood is natural. It doesn't necessarily need to be sealed, and it can weather naturally. But you will need to periodically check for splintering or cracking. Manufacturers who manufacture wood play equipment generally use a type of wood that is very rot resistant, like cedar or black locust or Douglas fir. And different manufacturers have different methods for preserving wood. So you need to really kind of check that out. But eventually, the wood will rot eventually. So you just need to be accepting of these natural characteristics. Wood does not absorb the heat like steel or plastic. It has many, wonderful qualities. It's also can be a learning experience for children, to actually learn about wood, be natural, it rots, what happens to it. But you need to also understand that maybe in 8 to 10 years it will need to be replaced. I think with any play equipment, it's just useful to go visit, ask manufacturers to tell you where their equipment is and take a look at them, see how long they've been standing and what condition they're in. There's certainly different qualities of equipment manufacturers, and one of the best way to see how well it's going to hold up is to go visit a site that's been installed 10 years ago or 12 years 15 years ago, and see what shape it's in. Next we're going to talk about choosing materials for your surfacing, which is the next slide. Okay, so when you're thinking about surfacing and you have play equipment, your play equipment is that if it has a fall height, you'll need to install playground safety surfacing within the use zone of the piece of play equipment, and the manufacturer will let you know, where that ball use zone is. Very, very generally, it's about 6 feet out from the outer perimeter of any play climber. And so there's different types of safety surfacing. One option is called unitary safety surfacing, playground safety surfacing. Unitary meaning that it's like bound together, it's not loose. So some types of this unitary safety surfacing options is the poured in place rubber safety surfacing, comes in many colors. There's a bonded rubber mulch material. It's made out of shredded rubber shreds that's bound together with like an adhesive. There's artificial turf. That's like a carpet that's rolled out. There's a newer product called corkine, which is made out of natural cork, but it's also bound together with an adhesive. So all these, the unitary surfaces really are fairly low maintenance. I think the thing you'll find that degrades them the most is probably direct sun. The first three, the poured rubber, the bonded rubber mulch, and the artificial turf, also being man-made materials and rubber or plastic, does absorb heat. So it can get hot. The poured rubber, if you choose a lighter color, will absorb less heat. So obviously, if you chose black poured rubber, which happened to be the least expensive of the colors, but it will get very, very hot. So we tend to use lighter colors like a beige or a kind of sand color combination for the poured rubbers, so it will absorb less heat. But the other thing they all have in common is that they're very expensive. So you might not have to replace them, for over 10 years, but they are the most expensive type of safety surfacing, with that corkine being the most expensive. Also, just want to say that when you choose one of these safety services, you want to make sure that your installer is reputable and you get references from them, because proper installation of these surfaces is really important for their durability and longevity. The next slide shows examples of the loose fill safety surfacing material options. So some of these loose material options are wood fiber, wood chips, sand, or pea stone. The wood fiber option you've probably heard of is an engineered wood mulch product. So basically it's made up of hardwood strands that have been tested so that they comply with playground safety surfacing ball height, so that they are a compliant surface. These options are a lot less expensive than the unitary surfaces that we saw, but they do require replenishment and periodic maintenance. So because they're loose, they're going to be kicked around. That happens at the bottom of the slide or bottom, base of the swings. They get, they get displaced. They will migrate out of what area you're trying to contain them in. And so because of that, because they're the wood specifically is a natural product, it degrades, and you will most likely have to replace it, or not fully replace it, but replenish it at least every year. But it is the least expensive, and it also has some play value to it. Children can use the sand or the wood chips, mud kitchens or mixing bowls and things like that. So it does have some additional play value. The other thing about the surfacing, the only surfacing, loose material surfacing that's considered ADA accessible is the wood fiber. And I would check with your local jurisdiction if in fact that they consider wood fiber an accessible ADA compliant surface. With the previous unitary options, typically they all are tested and are ADA compliant. So that's another benefit to the unitary. But you can mix them as well. So you could have an area that is with wood fiber, and or let's say wood chips or sand, and you provide an accessible path to your play equipment that's made out of like the rubber, which is accessible. So next. Okay, so then in areas that aren't required to have playground safety surfacing, you'll have other choices in surfacing or pavement materials. So other surfacing could be natural lawn, stabilized stone dust, concrete or asphalt for paths or play courts. Natural lawn is probably your least expensive, but your highest maintenance. So lawn is very, very high maintenance. In order to keep a nice natural lawn, you probably know just from your home experience, you need to water it, weed it, cut it, mow it, and you can't have a lot of heavy usage on it, especially in the play area. So there is a type of plant material. It's called no-mow lawn, which looks more like sort of natural grasses. It doesn't need to be cut. It just sort of keeps growing, and it kind of is very tufty. You can look into that. And so it doesn't need the mowing, but it still would require, watering. Stabilized stone dust is a natural product. On the West Coast, they call it decomposed granite, or DG. On the East Coast, we call it stone dust in the middle. I don't know what they call it. But it's possible. It's a loose stone, ground stone, stone kind of material that's used for pathways. We use it in our designs as in the stabilized form. So it has a adhesive sort of binder. So it gets kind of almost as hard as concrete. Not quite as hard, but it's a natural material. It takes a little bit more maintenance than concrete. It probably costs a little bit more than concrete. Um, I think that that's a picture of it on the top right there. And then there's concrete, very little maintenance on concrete as long as it's installed properly. And asphalt, very little maintenance on asphalt. Although asphalt will get very hot. The blacktop will be very hot in the direct sun. We need shade by either on the shady side of the building, shade structures, or trees. So let's see. So those are some options for other materials to use for surfacing the pavements in your play area. You're on mute.
Sorry. Maintenance, it's a given. You absolutely must plan for it, as Aaron and Megan talked about earlier, and you've got a budget for it. It's ideal to have a short-term maintenance plan in place and preventative maintenance plans in place. There should be daily, weekly cleaning specifications within your maintenance plans. There should be annual maintenance plans. Some things in the annual maintenance plan are, checking and testing all the smoke detectors, either monthly or seasonally, replacing fire extinguishers and checking for their expiration dates. Just a whole host. I'm not going to go through the whole list because you're going to get this, but these are some of the things that you want to check for on an annual basis or within the year. Next. Maintenance, there should be long-term maintenance plans. These are things that are in the 2 to 3 to 5 to 20 year replacement, but things that, like Aaron and Megan were talking about, that you need to kind of be setting aside a little bit of money each year, knowing that in 5 to 10 to 15 years, these things are going to need to be done. Next. There's always going to be surprises. Overflowing toilets, heat unit going out, storm damage, things that you just have no control over. But having a plan in place and a team to support you is crucial to success. Before you need a local plumber, get some recommendations from your neighborhood, your friends, your relatives about quality local plumbers. Maybe even consider inviting one of those plumbers into your preschool room and have them talk about what they do and what a plumber is and what they like about their job. Then you make sure that those children send cute little thank you notes with pictures showing that plumber respect and appreciation for their work as kind of a community helper. Developing that relationship in advance for when that inevitable plumbing problem happens, that plumber is probably going to be more willing to drop everything and come help take care of you and your center and those children if you've developed that relationship ahead of time. Having professionals show you the following: your water turnoffs. Sometimes there's local water turnoffs in your toilet rooms, but then there's also, if there's a massive problem, a turnoff somewhere else in your basement or somewhere to the building. Knowing where those are can be crucial in an emergency. Electrical panels and labels. I've been in my basement with the flashlight without my readers, trying to figure out which one has been tripped. Knowing kind of your electrical panel and where have it well labeled before you have that emergency is really great. If your center has gas, making sure that all the staff knows where the gas shutoff is in case of an emergency. If they smell gas, they should go and turn it off immediately. Having staff trained on how to use a fire extinguisher. It's not as easy as you think it is. And the last time you want to learn how to do it is while there's a fire in front of you. So just when you order, fire extinguishers expire. So when you order new ones, get those in place a month or two in advance before the other ones expire. Take those out to the dumpster, and with the staff meeting, have everybody try with the expired ones how to pull the pin and use the fire extinguisher. Just knowing how to do that can save you time and your facility in an emergency. So keeping documentation. Megan and Aaron also talked about this, but this is my home documentation. It has some of my paint colors. It has how to change the thermostat. It has my refrigerator instructions manual. And these things have troubleshooting things. It gives you the information of what your filter is that you need to order for your water, stove, all of these things. Having them in one place where you know where it is and you can quickly go and check something before you have to call that service person can really save you time and money when that inevitable thing goes wrong. So just having that in place in one place where you know where it is very valuable. Joanne?
Yep. Just as Karen says, maintaining your playground, having a binder with all the information about your playground equipment is really important. So in this binder, you have all your manufacturer's rep contact numbers when you purchase the equipment. Probably for licensing, you also need injury reports. That could help you kind of identify maybe places where you have frequent injuries and maybe there's something that needs to be fixed on your playground to avoid or eliminate those injuries. But you want to have your playground equipment installers, surfacing installers information all in the binder with the installation instructions. If something comes up with your playground equipment, you want to go to your manufacturer's rep first. You don't want to try to fix it yourself. You want to make sure that you're going to maintain warranty and that any repair will still comply with safety guidelines. So your maintenance program needs to be developed for the playground, and there are checklists available. Should have a schedule for inspections, and then you should have staff who's familiar with the playground to do these maintenance inspections. You might want to educate your staff by who's going to be maintaining the playgrounds by having them take if there's a certified playground safety inspector course that's offered through the National Recreation and Park Association so that they're familiar with the safety guidelines. Another option would be to hire a CPSI who can perform a playground audit, who looks at your playground, reviews it for compliance to the guidelines, any non-compliant issues pointed out in a report with a recommendation of how you can bring the issue back to compliance so that your whole playground would be then a baseline for safe, as a safe playground. So those things will ensure the health and safety and longevity of your outdoor space. I think Megan, I don't know if we wanted questions and answers. Oh, sorry, one more slide. I'm sorry about that. Just general site maintenance, right? Making sure your catch basins are unclogged. Obviously checking for any peeling paint on any metal. Checking your walkway pavements for any unleveling. Checking for, animal nests, and, general landscape maintenance will, increase the longevity, safety and health of your outdoor space.
One more slide. So we've talked about how to assess locations, how to design for less maintenance, planning for maintenance, and tips for helping you maintain your building and grounds. And even though this graphic is kind of shown in a linear time frame, it's really more circular because after you maintain, you still kind of keep assessing and keep, going through these steps over time, over the life of your center. we'd like to offer this time to see if anyone has any questions on our presentation.
Thank you so much, Joanne and Karen. We did have a question come in. Thank you, Joyce, who submitted this. Joyce just says she can testify to the durability of the commercial sheet vinyl. It's almost indestructible. But her question is around some concerns that she recently learned about invisible fumes, which vinyl may be sending into the environment and that people breathe. So just asking if you have any information about the safety of those vinyl materials. Are there some vinyl floor coverings that are more environmentally safe than others? Any information that you might have on that?
Yep. So vinyl, it is like a petroleum-based product, and it does give off those VOCs that people talk about all the time. There's sometimes VOCs in paint. There's sometimes VOCs in flooring. It's an off gas. But these days, trying to look, EPA has set the standards. It's much easier to find the safe non-toxic vinyl flooring because the EPA has set standards for products that meet the indoor air quality. And so now any current manufacturers, especially in the US, and there are some sheet vinyl companies in the US, Patcraft is one of them. We use a lot of their flooring, their sheet vinyl. So you just have to check they have these sheets called MDS safety sheets, and you want to before you specify it or before your architect specifies your flooring, or you want to just make sure it's one of those that is meeting those locals EPA standards. So, and there are companies in the US still making sheet vinyl that we know meet those standards. Does that
Thank
help?
you.
Okay.
And I don't see anything else in the Q&A at the moment. If you want to raise your hand at this time, we actually have to say goodbye to Studio MLA. So if you have any questions before they have to drop off the training, please just raise your hand and I'll give you ability to come off mute or ask in the Q&A chat box. And if any other questions come in after you leave, Karen and Joanne, we will circle back with some answers on that.
Thank you for your time today. We appreciate it.
Yes, thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much. And so thank you to Studio MLA. Now we have Rachel from IFF who's going to talk to us about building envelope maintenance.
So thank you, Megan. And again, hello to everyone. First things first, what is a building envelope? So it is probably exactly what you might think when you hear those two words. The building envelope includes a building's walls, windows, doors, roof, all the systems that work together to enclose a building and create the barrier between the inside of the building and everything outside of it. So that isn't the only function of the building envelope. Those systems are also forming the structure of your building. So in the context of today's conversation, though, we're going to look at how the systems work to form the barrier that keeps water and air out of your building while keeping you and the children and your staff and families and caregivers comfortable and dry inside. So for the next few minutes, we'll look at two systems in particular, masonry walls and your roof, and discuss what you would like to see in sound systems, what you might see sometimes instead, and how you can get ahead of those conditions. So masonry walls are a common wall construction that you see every day in your life. They're walls built of brick, blocks, stone, all joined together by mortar. And masonry walls, unlike this little spoon of sugar cubes you see right here, they want to be square, they want to be tight, and they want to be dry. And being dry might sound not entirely intuitive for exterior walls, which are exposed to all sorts of rain, snow, precipitation, but we'll get into that in the next few slides. But these conditions, square, tight, and dry, keep your building structure sound and keep water and unconditioned air from intruding into your building. So one of the most important things that you can do as you're surveying your building to anticipate any challenges with your building envelope is to ask why and explore that why. If you happen to see the brick, the block, the stone units of your wall, if they are crooked, if there are open spaces between the units, or if they're wet. So masonry does breathe in that it expands and contracts, and those conditions can invite water infiltration, which then can cause a lot of challenges that we're going to see in the next few slides. So unlike some materials, it is important to remember that masonry is not self-healing because once it's damaged, it requires repair to ensure that damage does not continue to perpetuate. So instead, we need to set the conditions that keep masonry square, tight, and dry, and then keep our eyes open when those considerations are no longer the case. And the biggest challenge with water is that its impact on masonry is usually, and roofs too, because we're going to look at roofs, is usually worse than what you can see. So by the time you see the damage, there is water in that location, and that water is likely seeping elsewhere as well. So Megan, if you can go to the next slide. And we'll pick up a little bit of time here. Maybe I'll go a little faster, but first and foremost, setting the conditions for keeping water away from your masonry starts with the structures that are designed just to do that. And you will see variations of these same structures, whether you have a home or a commercial center. These are your parapets, your gutters, your downspouts, your roof drains, and these structures must be present and intact in order to direct water off of your roof and away from your building. If they are not present, if they are not intact, as you can see in these photos, that is your first opportunity for intervention, just to repair these structures, to install them to begin with, to install gutters, to install your downspouts, to make sure that they are in operable condition, leading water away once they go through your downspout, leading water away from your building. So another consideration that isn't pictured here is the condition of the ground at your foundations, at the base of your walls, to continue directing water away from your building, pitching the ground away from your walls where water could otherwise collect and cause damage to the exterior walls or the interior space. So next slide, please. So to the point I mentioned earlier, the structures that direct water away from your building are so important because often you don't know that water infiltration is causing the damage to your building envelope until you start to see the evidence of it, which could be a long time in the making before that evidence is visible. So as a result of water getting behind your masonry walls, you will start to see conditions such as these, pictured in these two photos, these conditions here, where you start to see cracking, spalling of the masonry, and these are safety hazards. When units perhaps detach from the walls, they can create environmental hazards if water is getting behind the walls, creating mold development, and can also cause water infiltration from the exterior wall to your interiors, which can then take that damage from the water on the outside and bring it inside to your space. And we've probably all, hopefully not, but likely most of us have experienced what it means when you have water inside your home, inside your center, and sort of the chaos and the havoc that creates to damage finishes, furniture, time where you can't use your classrooms because they need to be repaired. And other features of your envelope that keep water from entering your interior, they're not pictured here, also include your windowsills, intact windowsills, flashing around your window openings. So, metal that prevents the opening, water from getting in the opening between your window unit and the wall above it or around it, and the seals around these openings. So Megan, next slide. So this is another example of conditions you might see if water happens to get behind your walls. And what you see happening in these two photos is the result of water pushing out the lintels, so a structural piece around the openings of a window or a door that's carrying the weight of the masonry. The result, it's water pushing out the lintels, which compromises the structural integrity of your walls, but it also causes, as you see here, bricks to separate from the building. And that then in turn creates the chain of conditions that we talked about in the previous slide, water continuing to get behind the walls, continuing to cause damage, cracking, spalling, water inside the building. So these conditions are self-perpetuating in that the water pushes out the lintels, separates the bricks, and also could degrade your walls, continue to degrade your walls and other systems as well, both interior and exterior. So Megan, next slide. So this photo is an example of a steel lintel, looking a little closer at that lintel that has become excessively rusty due to exposure to water that has not been directed appropriately from the building, but has come down the walls instead. And this is an important condition to look out for because, again, a lintel carries the load of a masonry wall over an opening, and a rusty lintel is a compromised lintel, and also indicates a compromised structure. So as we think about these conditions and the impact of water and the implications for your building, we think back to those structures and interventions, the preventative maintenance of which can help you get ahead of any impacts of water before it causes significant damage. Water always finds its lowest point. That's the thing about water. It will always find its lowest point and damage anything below it. So starting at the roof helps mitigate any damage to the walls below and mitigate the replacement and reconstruction of any areas that could be impacted. So next slide. So your roof is one of the most important factors in keeping your building warm, safe, and dry. And as someone who routinely has to get on roofs herself and is terrified every time I step on a ladder, I completely understand and empathize that roofs are somewhere most of us typically don't like to go, but some of the most likely opportunities for water infiltration into your building are focused on roofs, which are expressed in membrane penetrations, ponding of water, discoloration or texture in your membrane, which show signs of previous ponding, even if water is not there currently, missing flashings or wraps on the curbs for your mechanical equipment or your parapet walls. And fortunately, with regular inspection and vigilance, these conditions can, and any resulting damage can be mitigated. So next slide. So in these photos, you'll see some examples of these conditions on the left, evidence of discoloration of the membrane, suggesting ponding of previous water that had pooled on the roof. And then similarly on the right, degrading flashing at your parapet wall. Missing drains can create conditions where water can either seep into the building at vertical components or can't be directed off of your roof and away from your site as needed. Next slide. Just considerations, additionally on the top of your building, apart from the roof itself, is the mechanical equipment that supports the heating and venting and cooling or ventilation and cooling of the interior of your space. These are really big pieces of equipment. You want to maintain them for operational efficiency for your mechanical system, but also for the comfort of everyone inside. You'll want to maintain the curbs and the penetrations that support them. So you're ensuring proper ventilation of the units and also prevent water from entering your building. And then the next slide. So in this last slide, you'll see some conditions that you might encounter on your roof that indicate water is either is or could be a problem, signaling opportunities for intervention and repairs. So in the first two photos, starting from your left, you see evidence that your roof isn't dry, whether in the past, so you'll notice the staining from the photo on your far left, or currently, the next photo moving to your right, you see the pooling there. In the next photo, moving to your right, you see the issues of workmanship. While you may not recognize that condition for what it is, which is inconsistent application of waterproofing at your parapet wall, again, looking at those horizontal and vertical components, keeping those seams dry. You may not recognize what that is, but you can see that there's an issue of workmanship there. And that inconsistent application is a challenge that could create water getting on the other side of the application and negating the waterproofing that could have been in place and opening up an opportunity for water to be inside your building. And then finally, on your far right, billowing of the roofing membrane, it allows water to pond and potentially get underneath your membrane and into your center. So similar to your walls on the roof, by the time you see evidence of water, it's likely already creating chaos in some way. If you're purchasing or leasing a facility where these conditions are already present, then these will be conditions that you'll want to investigate and mitigate immediately so that you're limiting the impact to your center of water getting in the building. Or if you're leasing, negotiating repairs by the landlord to protect the interior space. But your goal is to prevent these conditions from occurring, which requires an inspection by a licensed roofer at least once every year, but maybe also your own inspection after any events that might cause water to pool or create penetrations in your membrane. And the most likely culprits are usually extreme weather events that create or even exacerbate the conditions that you see in these photos. So Megan, hand it over to you.
Thank you, Rachel. I don't see any questions that have come through in the Q&A. Just want to give folks a chance if you'd like to put a question in or if you'd like to raise your hand. We can take a minute to answer any questions live. But if not, we are going to go into some leased facility considerations. Okay, I don't see anything at the moment, but we'll pause if anything comes through and can come back if questions come up about those building envelope conditions. All right, Rachel.
So looking at leased facility considerations. So at IFF, we support ECE providers and nonprofits who own their facilities and also lease the spaces that are supporting their programs and communities. So the questions we've been exploring today around improving your space, and particularly the routine and deferred maintenance of your space, are really nuanced by whether you own or you lease it. So when you own your center, it's reasonably cut and dried. As an owner occupant, you are responsible for identifying, implementing, and funding maintenance and improvements to your center. But when you are a tenant, with whom do these responsibilities sit, right? Who's responsible for maintenance? How is that responsibility shared? Who pays for it? The answers are found in your lease agreement with your landlord as a tenant, and where the landlord and the tenant responsibilities for maintaining the space are outlined and detailed. So not every lease agreement is sound or negotiated with facility improvements in mind or prioritized, but these are very important terms to negotiate when entering into a leasing relationship and to continue to monitor as you're occupying the space and you begin to encounter facility conditions like some of the ones that I looked at with the building envelope, or that Joanne and Karen explored in their portion as well. But because these costs are most often shared in a leasing relationship in some way, understanding the baseline conditions of a building's conditions and ongoing maintenance needs and costs is really essential, so that you have a reasonable expectation as the tenant of the investments needed in the facility for the duration of your lease, the circumstances under which you can or even cannot undertake improvements to support your program, and then developing a plan for funding, whether funding the improvements, whether it's through your own budget or the landlord obligations to you. So Megan, next slide. So every lease is different, and these next two slides aren't intended to show you the exact language that you may or may not see in your own lease if you do lease, but it does give you a sense of what terms you might see or the spirit of the terms that you might see. Oftentimes you see language that indicates the tenant will accept a building in what's called as-is condition, and that requires you to make your own improvements to the space that will align your program and the facility. So for instance, if you want to move from group restrooms to in-class toilets, or you want new flooring, thinking about the questions of carpet tiles versus resilient tiles, if you need new acoustical ceiling tiles to manage noise in your classroom. If the space requires these improvements, the tenant is usually responsible for making investments within the terms that are agreed upon by you and the landlord. So those terms could have limitations on the extent of allowable changes to the space, notification to the landlord, contractor approval, and other similar terms and conditions. So exceptions to those provisions are often related to the landlord's obligation for providing a safe and code compliant facility where the landlord funds the cost of the improvements themselves. And these improvements could include parking lot improvements, ADA compliance, and fire alarm or suppression system renovations. Megan, next slide. And conversely, when it comes to building maintenance, there's often more latitude here, though the tenant obligation to keep the facility in good condition is nonetheless expected. But you see here, maintenance related to the building infrastructure or those components we discussed on the previous slide, often still does not fall to the landlord to maintain. These provisions vary greatly from lease to lease as the landlord and tenant consider shared responsibility of their relationship relative to the maintenance of space that the landlord owns, but the tenant must also use daily for the operations of their program and center. And Megan, last slide. So again, these conversations around shared responsibility of scope and cost do not begin when you are investing in a leased space or addressing a maintenance need. They begin as you are exploring spaces where you might want to locate your center and begin negotiations with the landlord of the space that you lease. So all negotiated terms have trade-offs, and I'm sure you're aware of that. At some point, having negotiated something, but some considerations to keep in mind that have implications for improvements to your space include the length of the lease and potential for renewal by the tenant beyond that initial term. So those term lengths help both landlord and tenant moderate their own level of investment in the relationship as expressed through occupancy of the space. So Erin, I'll hand it over to you for a case study.
Thank you so much. So building upon what Rachel has noted, I want to share just a quick project example. This is Children's Friend. They are based out of Providence, Rhode Island, but they're a multi-service agency offering Head Start, Early Head Start, state pre-K, and childcare services to children and families of Rhode Island. They're also a multi-site agency operating many different buildings. And they generally operate with a leased structure, some of which are actually co-located spaces. So they are one of multiple tenants in a space. So I wanted to look at it a little bit from the lens of that co-location. They've been able to share with us some of their non-negotiables and tips when considering maintenance relative to their leased spaces. So the first is if this is a new construction or if it's a restoration project and you're partnering with somebody else, it's really important to have the tenant turnover date in the lease, meaning when do you expect that you'll be able to access the space or when it's going to be turned over for you to make any changes to the space that are necessary. The next is if you're sharing a playground space with residents and the community, you need to confirm within your lease that you're protected from additional liability during your non-operational hours. And it's also really important to clearly identify what is the provider responsible for outside of the tenant space. So this could be things like snow removal or systems that actually service more than just your tenant space. Who is responsible for that and who is going to maintain that? And then, of course, which seems pretty obvious when you're thinking about contracts and leases, is to always have a legal review this to make sure that everything is clear and everyone agrees upon what they're doing. As far as negotiations go, the length of the lease often impacts what is covered by the provider versus the landlord. So quite often, usually there are more favorable terms, or there are more often services that the landlord will take on when you have a longer lease term agreement. And last but not least, as far as an easy lesson learned, is to just always manage and maintain your repair of projects and document that. So keeping a record of any improvements that you have made and documenting all of that maintenance over time really helps with tracking and recording your regular maintenance needs and potential time frame for improvements. And also, if there's something that you're consistently repairing, provides an opportunity for you to work with your landlord on incorporating that as for who takes ownership and responsibility over it, which is really exciting. So it's just all really important to make sure that you know what you're maintaining and managing, and that there is clear and open communication with your landlord. And I think with that, I'll turn it back to Megan for a bit.
Thank you. Almost to our last section here, we're going to spend a little time talking about how to fund maintenance strategies. Just going to go over a few things to think about, some of which we've already spoken to, but just food for thought here. Your annual budget set aside, making sure, as many of our presenters emphasized for us today that you're planning. It's really key. So plan to save and set aside funding in your annual budget for those required upkeeps and repairs, including playgrounds. And be sure to include any other kind of miscellaneous service items and agreements that you may have, like HVAC servicing, janitorial services. Um, and then that other component of budget, we looked at the replacement reserve. Again, equipment and systems, unfortunately, will eventually wear out. They'll need to be replaced. So to try to get ahead of some of those costs by setting aside some of those yearly savings to go towards those inevitable replacements that will happen. Studio MLA kind of gave us some of those useful life estimates for some of those common ECE facility components. The maintenance guide that we're going to be sharing out to you all also has some useful life estimates if you want to try to do that exercise we showed to estimate what your annual savings should be to anticipate some of those costs. The second item is to be prepared for potential funding opportunities. So both with the Rhode Island and the Arizona programs, they were accepting of some of those self-assessment checklists as documentation for health and safety improvement needs. So also keep in mind, some grant opportunities may not be as explicitly childcare related. So be on the lookout for other opportunities that you might be eligible for. Maybe there are opportunities for community facilities, small businesses, home repair. There are some other federal funding opportunities that may be coming down the line. So all that to say, maintain your inspections, keep your asset inventory up to date, and have those available so that you can quickly prioritize based on the goals of a grant program what you could apply for. So for example, maybe there are energy efficiency programs. Which brings us to our next bullet. When equipment's nearing the end of its useful life, maybe repairs don't make any sense anymore, and you want to explore replacing systems and equipment that could also increase your space's energy efficiency. There are some resources that can support you in kind of assessing if that makes sense for you over the long term to support your decision making and your budgeting. We're going to be sharing out a few links to some of those resources, but you can visit places like energystar.gov, where there are searchable databases of rebates, subsidies, incentives, and financing to support renewable energy and energy efficiency projects. Also, just make sure you do contact your local utility provider. Ask if they offer free or inexpensive energy audits or rebates for energy efficiency upgrades. And lastly, many CDFIs like LISC, like IFF, have expertise in lending to childcare programs. These lenders may be able to offer some flexible products and offer some support to you to walk through what can sometimes be a complicated process, which we're going to talk about a little bit more when we got into small business supports. But first, I'm going to turn it back over to Rachel to share some other considerations around funding maintenance.
Megan, that was a great segue, that final bullet into this section, because IFF works routinely with ECE providers in thinking through how you can, one, bring funding opportunities into a project, and then secondly, how do you deploy those funds effectively for your building improvement strategies. So thinking about this over the next few minutes, I know that probably many of us have encountered circumstances where we've completed our own assessments of our facilities. We've gotten ahead of maintenance that could be challenging down the line for our facilities, or we're making other improvements to space to support our programs. And similarly, many of us have probably encountered the circumstances once we've identified our maintenance or repair or replacement needs, where we've been limited in funding available to address those needs. So what should your considerations for prioritizing, what should your considerations be, I should say, for prioritizing where your dollars will go to have their greatest impact? So when working with our clients at IFF, we look at a very dynamic context that every opportunity for investment in your building exists within. So that context is created by you, your staff, the children in your classrooms, their caregivers, and your funders. So what factors form this context, and what is their potential relationship to revenue? So some items, particularly aesthetic improvements like flooring and paint, have a big impact on how a space looks or feels, while some are very hard to see. Think about electrical improvements so that your electrical system has the capacity to support your program needs, or plumbing improvements so that you can flush the toilets when those little ones are potty training, or think about mold remediation and how important that is to your children in the center and staff too, breathing clean air. It can be very hard to fundraise for those types of improvements, and you're usually only even noticing them if something is going wrong. So the good bones, it's important to remember that the good bones for your facility stability and the good bones for your financial health as a provider oftentimes go hand in hand. So we know how necessary it is to maximize the precious resources that you have for building investment when funds become available. You want to invest in your facility with regular maintenance to reduce those pricey variable costs later on, like unforeseen building repairs from deferred maintenance. And there are other factors that form this context for you to consider how to prioritize where that money goes. So these four factors really work together dynamically and should inform and help you prioritize every opportunity for investment in your building. So those include safety, licensing, or accreditation considerations. Think issues of egress, windows, railings, fall heights, accessibility. It could be comfort or operational needs, and that could be bathroom access, stroller storage, heating and cooling issues, building leaks and repairs. Program needs for growth or curriculum or learning outcomes. And those could include lighting, wet play, outdoor spaces, or even increased capacity for your center. And finally, beautification or aesthetic improvements. And that's the fun stuff, right? Signage, paint, landscaping, new flooring. So Megan, if you'll go to the next slide. So we might go a little bit faster through these next few slides, but you'll be getting them, you'll be getting them in your packet. You'll be able to review them. So thinking about the opportunities that generate the greatest impact for your facility and your program, the next several slides share those ideas. Some are direct in terms of their impact on buildings, others indirect, but starting with improvements that reduce interior maintenance needs. The examples here where strategic consideration is at the intersection of materials and use can prolong the useful life, not only of the improvements themselves, but the environments in which they're installed. So you'd be reducing maintenance needs and reducing maintenance needs, and then also the ongoing maintenance costs as well. So think about flooring finish, Karen and Joanne shared their thoughts earlier about carpet tiles and their roles in harboring dirt and germs, but also think about how quickly carpet tiles wear down. What can you replace them with when the time comes? Durable flooring, those that Studio MLA highlighted, luxury vinyl tile, even VCT. Think about the walls in your toilet rooms, how susceptible drywall is to water from toilets and sinks, and how repairs might give way to tile installation of those wet walls to protect against water, which prolongs the period of maintenance for those walls, and also limits costly repairs down the line due to water impact. So also thinking about your building's exterior, what we talked about earlier regarding maintenance or masonry walls and roofs, interventions that prevent damage, but also interventions that can cure. So those concepts apply beyond masonry as well. Different finishes such as EFIS. So that's an acronym for Exterior Insulation and Finish System. It's a commonly used product, but it's also susceptible to penetrations and water and weather damage. Thinking about what exterior material could be used instead to prolong that period between maintenance and limit costly repairs later on from the degrading of that material. So I'll probably go to the next slide. And just looking here, we're not going to spend time. We want to give LISC a couple of minutes to finish up here. But these are the considerations that have a more indirect impact on facilities rather than a direct impact on facilities, but they're still highly impactful all the same. So for this first bullet, considering how facilities that are safe and comfortable, not only for children, but for staff, can attract high quality teachers and help classrooms stay open. In the second bullet, hearing all the time at IFF from ECE providers how families prioritize ECE settings that feel safe and comfortable. So thinking about how you can use facility investments to also create settings where families and staff really want to either work there or send their children for care on a day-to-day basis. And then the last slide. Similarly here, and we talked about this earlier, looking at investments that create predictability in your future expenses, that routinize maintenance and limit costly repairs, investments that invite additional investment in either your program or your facility so you can continue to invest in program and space. And we know that this can always feel very overwhelming and it can be difficult to prioritize. But there are some or all of these considerations may be relevant to you along with others that aren't listed here. And this list is not intended to overwhelm. It might, but really to encourage you to keep in mind that addressing issues of deferred maintenance in your building, even though that can feel mundane, can have a really leveraged impact if you consider strategy and sequencing of these improvements and the impact that they can have on your center beyond the improvements themselves. And with that, I'll hand it to David.
Thank you very much, Rachel, and thank you, everyone. I will try and keep it brief too, and maybe focus on a few key takeaways when it comes to funding some of these renovations and projects. And then we would love to follow up with any of you individually after on any of this, and specifically when it comes to funding to help answer any questions that are specific to your needs. One of the takeaways both Rachel and Megan have mentioned, I think, is to keep in mind the acronym CDFIs. This is Community Development Financial Institutions. They're normally nonprofit organizations, and these are mission-focused, relationship-focused lenders that can help fund these projects. CDFIs will focus their efforts in different ways. Some are what we call micro lenders that might do $1,000, $5,000, $10,000 loans to help you get certified or provide some initial working capital. Then there are CDFIs like LISC that can kind of look at the next level of lending, as you'll see here by the dollar sizes. So we'll focus on the one to the far right, leasehold improvements and renovations like we're talking about. LISC does also do loans such as commercial real estate. So if you're ever looking to acquire your own facility and some of those other areas too. But we can go ahead and go to the next slide if you'd like, and we'll talk about some of the renovations and leasehold improvements. So this is an example of a LISC loan to a child care facility. I think the key takeaway here, as you'll see from the right, it is very specific. So really working with you, and again, these relationship, mission-focused, hands-on types of lenders who will really want to work with you and your contractor, as you see here, to get a very itemized budget, have a really good sense of the specific line items going into the construction, to furniture, fixtures, and equipment, to make sure we're fully addressing that with the funding need. The second key takeaway here, less on the sources and uses that you'll see, but is just the cash flow that's being put together to make sure that as we go through your tax returns and your financials and work with you on those, and then your accountant or any other technical assistance providers that are helping on the financial side, we'll want to make sure that your operations and your cash flow supports that level of renovations. And sometimes that involves going back and working with you and the contractor. Sometimes that's phasing out the project to make sure it's manageable. But those are kind of the two key takeaways as a lender and a funder that we're working with you on to make sure that we capture everything needed and that it's manageable in terms of repayment. If we can go to the next slide, I think that we'll kind of talk about that too. So renovations, this example actually was for an expansion. It was somebody that Aaron and team had given great technical assistance to over the course of a few years, and had really mapped out the expansion strategy to go to a second location. Then on the lending side and the funding side, we again kind of took it and made sure that that expansion was something that was manageable from a cash flow perspective. That involved looking at the historical operations of the first facility and working with the child care center on projections for that second facility. The other scenario, I guess it would come up the most, right, is just renovations to your existing facility. In that case, that could be a variety of different things. Maybe you're not currently able to be at capacity because you have to make some of these renovations, or maybe you are, but you just need to make them for any of the reasons we've kind of listed today, if something comes up, or just ongoing maintenance of the facility. So even more reason in those cases too, that for your cash flow, for your operations from the current facility, we want to get a really strong understanding of how that works, your operational cycle, and when you're getting paid, things of that nature, to make sure the structure of the loan is something that is again manageable. I think that's the biggest takeaway, that making sure that the cost of renovations and the repayment that you're making on those is something that fits in your cash flow. So we really do look forward. A lot of these things are just very one-on-one conversations that we would love to have as a follow-up after the presentation today.
Thank you so much, David and Rachel. Definitely, we can follow up with folks afterwards. I know we're at time here. Thank you for hanging in there with us. And I know this was a lot of info. Again, we'll send all of this out to you, including links to all of the resources that we've talked about today. And to actually build upon what David has shared with you today, he has also actually done a full small business lending training that has been recorded. It's available in English and Spanish. But you can also see here we have our Maintaining Your Childcare Facility Investment Guide we'll be sharing out as well. So that will also be something that you'll have if you wanted to take a deeper dive or go back and take a look at any of these checklists, resources, libraries we have available for your use. With that, we'll leave you with our contact information. I don't see any questions left, but I will hang on the line if you want to raise your hand and ask a question. If not, please feel free to reach out to us at any time. Technical assistance is what we do every day, so we definitely want to hear from you and work with you and get you connected to the right resources. Thank you all for joining, and thank you so much to our panelists. Really appreciate you all. And we hope you have a great day. Thank you. I'm just going to stay on for another few minutes in case anyone remaining has any questions, but otherwise, thanks everybody.
And thank you, Megan. That was fantastic and well coordinated.
Thank you, Erin. am going to stop the recording.